Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by Chris McElwain. It's 12:30, it's a weekday, and Acsom is here as normal. Merry Christmas to you, Chris. Obviously, we say that for a wee while after the event for people that we've just been meeting up with. But right back in to normality, we're also going to be joined by Ian Conroy. There he is, the man from the future. There he is. Merry Christmas to you as well, Ian. We're here to talk all things Celtic, and look at that tagline. I'll start with yourself, Ian. Another meltdown. How many have we had this year? I'm not quite sure, but this is a festive meltdown with a difference. There's a 12-point gap. It's all the referee's fault. And Celtic obviously just career forward, keeping their own backyard in order. How are you enjoying it, Ian?
There's a kind of a certain amount of inevitability about it. You know, it happens sort of every year. I've seen that thing on the internet where it's like a wheel, isn't it? And it's got like, you know, the so many stages of where Rangers are, you know. So it's like, you know, back to the manager, he's a genius, etc., etc. So it's back to he's almost a dud again, isn't he? There's a lot of clutching at straws, you know. And I've not been on for a few weeks. So I've not really sort of passed comment on the cup final win and sort of the subsequent meltdown after that. Look, I've got loads of Rangers supporting mates, you know, and it's like, you know, they're all decent people, and they're laughing at themselves a lot as well, you know. So I think there's a lot of it sort of pushed by the media. The fact that sort of Willie Collum and his team, he chucked his team under the bus, I thought was a bit of a reactionary kind of measure, really. I mean, they could have just said, look, as we all thought, and I certainly thought when the foul was given, he blew earlier on. It was the contact, with the leg outside the box. He could have just said that and said, look, he blew the whistle for that.
Yep.
And drew a line, drawn a line under it, but he didn't do that. You know, he sort of he perpetuated the kind of, you know, the narrative really, which has got them going. So they seem bruised by it. I don't think they were all that, to be honest. I think that I listened to Clyde Superscore, as I've mentioned as well, which I've got a sort of a little bit of a soft spot for. You know, I know it's a bit rubbish, but it's my little link back to home as well. You know, so that when I'm cooking and stuff, you know, it's as much comedy as anything else. But you know, listen to that, and I was listening to Acsom the other day, and he was saying, you know, that the narrative is like, you know, they were sort of world beaters, you know, and they're back and they're coming and things like that. And look, it could have gone either way. It was a penalty shootout, but it went our way, and I think it went our way. It wasn't a coincidence, you know. We've got that mentality. We've got a winning mentality, and we know how to get it over the line. So yeah, I think since they dropped the points against St Mirren, it was yesterday. My days are all over the shop at the moment, but since yesterday, they're sort of they're kind of they're shooting themselves in the foot with their mentality. So yeah, bring it on.
No, you're spot on, Ian, in many, many respects. And I do think that their meltdown, I think what we also need to realise, Chris, is that, you know, they're building themselves up, whereas over the last wee while, and there was a comment yesterday that I shared with the group where there are certain people just continually knocking Celtic. And what I would say in respect to that is after the Dundee United game, I think our headline the following day was around "No need to panic." Now that wasn't aimed at Celtic supporters. It was aimed at this narrative that Ian's talking about, where you know, what was it called, a mini blip or a mini wobble or some nonsense like that. And it's like, when you look at the entirety of a season, no matter how successful that season is, there are certain games that you don't get the 3 points. I mean, it's not a wobble. You're not, you know, you're not going off track. You're not going off piste. It's just one of those days where, as I keep saying, a wee moment of magic for Kyogo and you win the game 1-0 and everybody forgets about it. But then adding this into, this is a 10-game run of poor performances and all this kind of stuff, I'm not buying that, right? Because Celtic are sitting pretty at the top of the league, 12 points ahead of our nearest challengers, right? And whoever that might be, it could be Aberdeen, because they've been challenging all season, if that's what you want to call a challenge. And then and now Rangers are second in the league, 12 points ahead. We're hosing it, Chris. Let's, for a moment, right? Let's just stop being a wee bit kind of careful with our words. We're hosing it. It's 12 points ahead. We've won the League Cup. We're making progress in Europe. Yeah, there just is a tendency at times to fire at Celtic and criticise the style of play and criticise Brendan Rodgers. We're playing a game every 3 days. There's going to be 1 or 2 occasions where you're not your best. And by the way, I think there were mitigating circumstances against Dundee United in relation to if you lose that amount of your defence, if you lose Johnston, Trusty and Carter Vickers, then you're going to feel it. If you lose Kuhn, the most productive player in Scottish football this season, you're going to feel it. The drop down in quality from Kuhn to his replacement, it's all there, right? So we didn't panic. We went out yesterday, we're sitting at 1-0 up at half-time, and yet there was still this tendency to say we're not playing well. And listen, we've got the quality, Chris. So far in 2024, Celtic have lost 2 games in the calendar year 2024. One of them was away at Hearts, where Brendan Rodgers called out the incompetency of the refereeing, and one of them was against Borussia Dortmund with absolutely leathered us. 2 games in the entirety of 2024. Now, if we can't accept that as being decent, right? If we can't, then there's a problem, Chris. There's a problem, because how much better can it get?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Merry Christmas to everyone on the chat that's joining us, and hope everyone's had a great time and looking forward to the new year. And look, this is a season of goodwill, right? And this is a season of kindness between man versus man. And I think we should always take this time to acknowledge our great rivals at this point. So with that said, let me offer my sincere congratulations to St Mirren. Good job, boys, well done. But no, going back to the point, like I remember back to the Martin O'Neill, the first season, the treble winning season. And I remember, and funnily enough, I think the game was against St Mirren, funnily enough, where we could win the title that day. And I think we did with a Tommy Johnson goal, if I remember right. It was the famous one where I think he used his right foot, which scuffed it with the right foot, I think, yeah. And I remember watching that game, and in one of the greatest seasons I can remember, it was the most awful, diabolical, pain in the backside game to watch. It was horrible. It was not good. You cannot turn it on and perform every single match, right? And I dare say all 3 of us are a similar vintage. And the fact is, we remember when times weren't good. We went through the whole 9 in a row from Rangers, with all the Watersmith years, the tragic Tommy Burns years where we played some great football but we couldn't get over the line. And now, there's a generation that have only known the success over the past few years. And listen, I don't think our supporters are necessarily entitled, but I do see sometimes as this little slightly unrealistic level of expectation creeps in. And suddenly you expect us to be putting 5 or 6 or 7 goals in every game. Look, we don't have a God-given right to go out there and beat every single team. We don't have a God-given right to absolutely hammer teams. But we recognise we're the top team in Scotland. We've got the most resources, we've got the best players, we've got the best manager, we've got far and away the best support. So, I understand why the expectation levels are what they are. But we have to apply that wee layer of realism and say, look at what we're achieving this season, not just domestically. Look at what we're doing in Europe. Forget the new format argument where people say, well, that played into our hands. We've still got to go out there and beat the teams or play and compete the teams in front of us. And we're doing it this season. We've got a manager who's got the team moving in the right direction. We've got some absolutely standout players. You've mentioned Kuhn. I think Maeda is just getting better and better. We've got a great looking defence. AJ, fabulous, wonderful goalkeeper. I just think there's more to be positive about than not. And that's not to say that we're exempt from criticism. I think criticism is fine, but apply your criticism with a layer of recognition of the circumstances we're in at the moment, right? We are playing, as you say, sometimes two occasions a week, sometimes mixing with Europe. We've got players who are getting fatigued, injured. We're having to make changes. We've still got a job to do in recruitment in terms of January. I think that's fair. But for me, it's great. And you get days like yesterday where, starts off kind of bit of a rough first half, a bit laboured. We bring on the reinforcements in the second half, and what a turnaround. Absolutely phenomenal. And then we get the wee icing on the cake. We St Mirren doing as a wee solid.
They did us a solid. They did. We'll be talking about all the positive aspects of the game, but I think that, as football fans, Ian, it's not entitlement to pick out things you're not happy with in terms of a performance. But I think the minute you start going for the team or going for Brendan Rodgers, when we are where we are today, then I find that hard to accept. You just need to rewind to this time last year, where, Kilmarnock and Hearts beat us back to back. and it looked as though we didn't really know where we were going at that point. You fast forward to now and you're thinking, right, it's stabilised. Not only that, we have had some tremendous performances this season, but you're not going to get them every single match day. You're not going to get Leipzig. You're not going to get that free-flowing football that we saw against Aberdeen when we absolutely trounced them 6-0 at Hampden. But we've shown that we can do that, and we'll do it again this season. We will do that again. We have taken 5 goals off Ross County in one half of football this season. We've absolutely annihilated Rangers in the first game of the season against them 3-0. It was easy. So we're going to see games like the Dundee United match. I'm just going to remind you, because the Invincible season, you look at it through a golden hue. You look at it and think everything was perfect. It was an invincible treble. Of course, everything was perfect. It wasn't perfect. It absolutely wasn't perfect. And I mean, you look at the league that we were in at that particular time, right? And the team that was relegated, Inverness Cali Thistle. The team that finished second bottom of the league, Hamilton Accies. We dropped points to Inverness Cali Thistle in the invincible season. We drew 2 each with them, right? Hamilton Accies, we beat them 1-0 in the December of the invincible season. There was a game against Partick Thistle that was scraped through 1-0, Partick Thistle. And yesterday's opponents, Motherwell, you'll remember we beat them 4-3 at Fir Park. Remember that game? 4-3, we beat them at Fir Park. But because it was a swashbuckling performance and it was end-to-end stuff, and we were behind them, we were in front, etc., you don't remember it as being a bad performance. Yesterday's was a more accomplished performance than the 4-3 against Motherwell at Fir Park. We almost lost it. We were behind twice in that game, Ian. So it's great to look at aspects of the game that we're unhappy with, but I think there's, you've got to take it to a certain degree and be as balanced as you possibly can. I think so far, and it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on how well Rodgers has done this season so far. I know you're a massive fan of Brendan Rodgers, Ian. You were a fan of him when he was the manager at Liverpool, obviously first time round here at Celtic. I think he's doing a brilliant job. It's difficult to know what could be better at this stage of the season, when you're top of the league cup in the trophy cabinet, Champions League is a possibility in terms of the playoffs. We couldn't really do much better, could we?
Well, I was thinking the other day about, I shared that article about Ange Postecoglou, which I thought was pretty balanced. I don't know if anyone got a chance to read it. I think it's Football 365. Sort of it was, because a lot of people are kicking Ange down south for this kind of, it's his up and down roller coaster nature of his Tottenham team at the moment. And, we kind of witnessed that with Ange latterly in the Champions League. But I was thinking, if we had a straight swap now as Celtic fans, and I'll put this out to everyone, if you could have a straight choice, would you have Ange back, or would you keep Brendan? And
great shout. That's a great question.
Yeah, as much as I loved Ange, and I was really vocal. I wrote a blog on it as well. I would keep Brendan, and that's not recency bias. I think it's because Brendan has that magic, that kind of swashbuckle, but he does mix it a little bit. He does change it, and he's got a bit of a plan B and a plan C. He can do that in game. So, and let's be fair as well. I think if there's an expectation that we can have another invincible season, I don't think it'll happen. That shows you how hard it is. I think there will be a blip. I think we will lose a game this season. I hope we don't. But there's teams are setting up in a very defensive line. In a low block. A lot of, to use sort of modern parlance. But you've got to counter that. And added in the fact that we had, there's a few changes enforced upon us against Dundee United. Jim Goodwin's sort of renowned for, setting his teams up in a certain way. He did the same with St Mirren, to good effect. And managers have got to do that with the tools they're given at certain clubs. So, we didn't lose. We could have lost that game last season. We might have lost that game. So I think the trajectory is going the right way. I hope Brendan stays longer than the 3 years, unless I can't see him getting emptied, as he said. And we build, we keep building, and we keep adding that class and that quality and this evolution that we're seeing before our eyes. It keeps developing, and then we become one of those teams that are synonymous again in Europe.
Yeah, there's so many things to take from that, Ian. The first one, let us know in the comments section your answer to that. Who would you take? Because, listen, when Brendan Rodgers was here first time round, a Celtic State of Mind came into being. in 2017, and I was a huge fan. So what you get if you go back through the archives, and the archives are being uploaded to our audio platform as well right now, is you get the reaction of Brendan Rodgers leaving Celtic at that time. You get the reaction from myself and Kevin Graham. And then the reaction of Neil Lennon getting a job permanently, and then the whole COVID thing that, day by day, every single thing that happened at Celtic Park, we covered it through that whole process. Then the Eddie Howe chase and the arrival of Ange Postecoglou and the way that he won our hearts. And we all, let's be honest, we all bought into the Ange thing, right? He leaves, doesn't get much criticism for the way he did that because he stayed to the end of the season, which I think was a massive part of it. Although the decision was made a few months before, let's just say, doing deals for Spurs, etc., whilst he was still the manager of Celtic. But he seems to get away with that, whereas there's some people still got an issue with Rodgers in the way that he left. And then Brendan Rodgers comes back. And I said all the way, I've supported every single manager that I've mentioned there. In fact, since I started going to the games in 87, I've supported them all, Chris. I supported Lou Macari and Liam Brady and Tony Mowbray and John Barnes. I supported everybody who held that position at Celtic Park. But there's nothing wrong with criticism. Nothing wrong at all with that as long as it's balanced. This season, what do you think you could criticise Brendan Rodgers' team over? Sometimes there's periods of a game where it goes really flat. It doesn't look as though we've got a high enough tempo. But I actually think, and I've said this before with Kevin McCluskey during games, I think it's just the way Brendan plays his game. Sometimes he tires them out, and it's not great to watch, and you're going left to right, and you're going at horseshoe, and you're doing all that kind of thing. But you're actually tiring out the opposition. So I'll say it again, if you go back to the Invincible season where we beat Motherwell 4-3 at Fir Park, Motherwell go 2 up, Celtic pull it back, right, to 2 each. Motherwell go 3-2 up, Celtic pull it back almost immediately to 3 each, and then we win the game at the death. And everybody remembers it as a classic, Chris.
Yeah.
But what about the poor defending? What about the fact that we were behind twice in the game? Yesterday, we were completely controlled, absolutely controlled the game. And there were periods of that first half where, it didn't look as though the tempo was high enough. But, somebody gave us a stat yesterday that in half of the league games, we were sitting level at half-time in the league this season, in half of the league games. So I think we just got to suck that up and get used to that. The problem against Dundee United was we couldn't go through the gears in the second half. We couldn't find that spark, that bit of magic. Yeah. And that's why I do use the fact that we were missing 5 quality players, because that then affects the bench and it affects the changes you can make at the 60 and 65-minute mark, which I thought were massive yesterday. We bring on 2 players that score yesterday. That's huge. We couldn't really do that against Dundee United. We didn't have the quality on the bench due to the illness. So it's really just... You know what? You thought it was 2 points dropped last week. And look at us now. We're actually extending our lead because St Mirren did us, as you say, a solid. And they're greeting into their cornflakes this morning. And we can actually say, listen, things are fine. Things are fine. But I'm going to go back to Ian's point, and I'm going to ask you the question directly, Chris, because he said it, and I'll give you my answer. Would you take it back? No chance. I'm happy with what we've got. Absolutely not. And I think there was a massive period of that Brendan Rodgers return that was a transition from Ange. And I think there was almost a hangover from Ange. And there were certain players that took their time to adapt. Some might say they haven't adapted. Rio Atati wasn't getting a game. Took him a while to adapt. Has Kyogo adapted to Rodgers? Will he ever be the same player he was under Ange? Maybe not. It's a point of discussion. Despite all that, I would take Brendan Rodgers every single time. What about yourself?
Yeah. No argument at all. I've supported Brendan Rodgers since his first stint. I've always been impressed with him as a manager, and I'll be honest here. I don't like to see any successful manager leave Celtic, and I felt there was a real missed opportunity as a Celtic fan for Rodgers to cement his legacy by getting us a 10 in a row. But look, COVID happened. I don't think any manager, Neil Lennon or otherwise, could have done much that season. And some of the insight we've had, and actually some of the insight I've been able to get through working with Acsom and talking to people who had real knowledge of what went on during that season, really puts things in perspective. There were a lot of challenges that were never reported, were never given airtime, were never, were never publicised. And actually, it's just one of those seasons where you just think, could on another year, different circumstances, it'd have been ours, but it wasn't, and we move on from that. Rodgers coming back though, I don't think he had to come back and show penance or anything like that. He's a football manager. He's like the rest of us. We see a better job You know, no matter how much you love your current job, you see a better job or a job out there which allows you to go and maximise your income and you know, do the right thing by your family. Most of us would take it. So I've got no issue with the way Brendan left. But coming back, what I think we've got with Brendan is a more mature, a more savvy manager than he was even then. And I think he's demonstrated that with showing more adaptability, particularly in Europe. I think he has recognised areas of the squad that he needs to improve. You know, we've spoken about the fact there are definitely elements within the squad that we think are not quite up to the mark, and the remnants of the prior recruitment regime. You know, the obvious contenders are players like Yang, Palma, Odenholm, etc. I mean, these are guys. So as much as we get behind them, we want to see them do well. I think they're not really taking their opportunities. And I appreciate Yang won the penalty yesterday, but I from what I saw, I still wouldn't necessarily say he's taking the opportunity presented to him. But the foundation of the squad is excellent, and we saw that with the substitutes we were able to bring on. You know, you bring on Kuhn, huge upgrade in quality. You know, you're bringing on Hatate, and he comes on and he scores a tremendous goal. You know, phenomenal. Kyogo comes on, he gives you that different option to Ida. Is he playing, you know, as well as he is, or as well as he was under Ange, rather? I think he is. I just think he's having to adapt his game differently. I just think we don't play that swashbuckling type football. We're more pragmatic. But the fact is, we're getting results. One of my biggest criticisms of Ange was that there never seemed to be a plan B. There never seemed to be, you know, what happens if teams suddenly are able to defend and soak up the pressure? How do we get the win? And there was this element of we never stop, and it was great, and we got the last minute goals from Ralston and players like that. But I feel more confident about managing games through to completion with Brendan Rodgers. I really do. I think he's demonstrated that. The Dortmund game had us all terrified about, you know, God, is this a level that we need to try and compete with? We're just going to get hammered continually. But actually, whether he admits it or not, I think he learned a lot from that match, and I think we saw the learnings in the next couple of games in Europe, and the improvement for me has been you know, incredible. So.
Well, you mentioned there Europe, right? And you can take the game that we go away to Bergamo, right? And we get a 0-0 draw. And you ask the question, I know, listen, it's all just hypothetical. You ask the question, could our Ange Postecoglou team have gone and done that? Well, he wouldn't have approached it like that, because, you know, this plan B thing, this is where he's getting all the stick at the moment down south, isn't he? I'm not a massive English football fan. I've said it on here before, and I'll continue to say it. It's not my bag. I'm not into it. I don't watch it that often. Used to love it. Back in the Panini days, I knew all the players, every single one of them. Oh, yeah. I mean, hey, Panini stickers, Ian, man. It was an education. And the shoot in the match magazines. You knew every Oxford United left back. Yeah, you knew him. You knew his age. You knew where they signed him, the whole thing. Now, I'm not so sure. But I think that's the big thing, Chris. We're talking about this plan B. And Ange continually says it in his press conference. It's the one thing that really irks him, isn't it? When people, so obviously if he does come back, I'll send you at the first press conference. It's the one thing he hates to be asked about, because what he plans in his mind is this football utopia where he plays his style of football, Ian, so well that he wins regardless of the situation. And there's no adapting. There's no defending. It's just like, no, we just absolutely overpower the opposition no matter how good they are. That's his mentality, isn't it? And by the way, I take my hat off to him for that. But if you want to be successful as a Celtic manager in Europe, that's not going to work. You look at the game we mentioned today, Borussia Dortmund. Let's not forget, we scored the goal in that game, didn't we? It was Dyson Maeda, I think. One each, we annoyed them. We kicked a hornet's nest, and then they took us to pieces after that. But if you go back to we've mentioned it today, so I'm going to mention it again, the invincible season, right? And I'm in agreement with Ian here. I would love to do it again. It's one of my kind of bucket lists as a Celtic fan. I would love to do another 10. I'd love to do another invincible season. I'd love to do something in Europe. But in the invincible season, Barcelona pumped us 7-0. Let's not forget that. And that was the first game of the group stage of the Champions League. They destroyed us, you know, and that was a punch in the guts. And there were some games in that run that you looked at and you thought, okay, you always remember the two draws against Manchester City. Mönchengladbach, I think away, there was a miss. I think McGregor had a good chance, didn't he, away from home in the 1-1 game. Right. And there was wee moments, but there was that absolute pumping from Barcelona back then. So nothing's perfect in that respect. And if we get through to the playoffs this season, you know that Borussia Dortmund game, it's there. It's going to be there, but it's not going to put a dampener on anything this season. You know, you're not going to look back on this season and go, but Borussia Dortmund dismantled us 7-1 and all this kind of stuff. As you say, Chris, I think we've learned from it, and that is pragmatic. That's as pragmatic as you can possibly get. I'm really keen to get as many of you into the comments as possible. We've got a 1 hour show today to talk about Celtic. It's Friday. Does it feel like Friday to you guys? Does it feel like a Friday to me?
Calendars all over the place. No idea where I am.
You're right off schedule, aren't you? You're right off schedule. But it is Friday. We've got a game on Sunday against St Johnstone, and then all eyes on the 2nd. And a Celtic State of Mind, of course, will be not only covering the game as normal on here, but we will also be at Bad to watch the game live with Acsom addicts, as quite a few people on here describe them. So I'm going to start off with Urban Culture. Always great to see you, sir. Good day to fellow Acsom addicts. In fact, a very good day. Yes, it is. It's a good Friday is what it is. Stevie boy, why is all the media strangely quiet? Have they begun to realise their favourite team just aren't all that? This is what I was talking about with regards to this this mini wobble. I think a few of us, after the excesses of Christmas, will be feeling a mini wobble, Ian. But it certainly isn't Celtic that are having a mini wobble. Yes, the media are out in force. Yes, there's a good news story whenever they string a couple of results together. And also there was the pressure around the refereeing situation at the League Cup final. But I think the rise of independent media, rebel media, fan media, whatever you want to call it, DIY media, Ian, is getting to the point now where you're looking at some of these comments that you know, apparently last week there is Rangers are back in the title race. This is one of the mainstream titles in Scotland who have covered Scottish football and who used to go out to something like 1 million people every Sunday in a printed edition. Right, so I don't know what the distribution is now, but very, very influential back in the day, Ian. And that is the kind of opinion that they're putting out, that Rangers are back in a title race. Celtic have had a mini wobble. And I think it's on us, actually, Ian. It's on us as a platform to challenge that, because we're now at a stage now where we're going toe-to-toe in terms, if you want to talk about distribution, the distribution of today is the audience, isn't it? It's the amount of people who watch the show. And we can go toe-to-toe with these platforms now. So they're talking absolute garbage. And it's all right for us to say that, Ian, because, you know, one game where you've dropped a couple of points and a stalemate against Dundee United at Tannadice isn't a turning point in a season. It doesn't breathe life into a new title challenge from a club who have been sitting third and worse all season long. But for years and years and years, there was no way to challenge that narrative. Now there is, Ian, and that's what we're doing now, isn't it?
It is. I think most of us will probably appreciate that the mainstream media, they need to be a rivalry. You know, they need to have that combat. You know, like the Cowboys and Indians, or you know, that there's always got to be a two sides to the coin, isn't there? And plays off each other. Really, that boosts their sales, that boosts the interest in their articles, which a lot of it is just nonsense. So it's very rarely that when I'll skim through the online newspapers. I personally used to love the physical form of a newspaper, and devour newspapers, especially at the weekend. You know, get an array of newspapers and sit and sort of read cover to cover. Scottish football and English football. I mean, I grew up in England, so it was actually easier to read the English press with little snippets about Scotland. And obviously, when I was back home for the holidays, all the Scottish newspapers, you know, and there was you're right, you know, that narrative was set, you know, and there was very little to challenge it, and a lot of people would just go along with that narrative. But with the likes of this platform and all the other fan media, you know, we can all counter it, and we can all be the voice of reason, you know, and interrogate these things that are written. And I noticed the other day that little known article about Kyogo apparently being, you know, that Ronnie Dyler being interested in taking him. You know, it's all these little things to destabilise and little snippets to chuck in. I mean, it might not just be to destabilise; it might just be a little. Well, it probably is, you know, but it's just in there to sell a newspaper. You know, it's to get some clickbait. So it's like the meltdown with Rangers. You know, for me, it's like, let's just not give it any oxygen. Laugh at it and move on. You know, it's all just puff pieces.
It is one of the ones, Ian, where you enjoy it for that moment. I mean, yesterday, sitting round at the folks' house with the old man who used to take me back in the day, and enjoying the moment and just laughing at it. Because at the end of the day, why not? We're football fans, Chris, right? Absolutely. We're going to be looking at different aspects of yesterday's performance. When it comes to, here's the thing, when it comes to the mainstream, and I think you've got to be as fair as possible on this. For example, if I'm doing some research, right, there's a national newspaper archive which you can subscribe to and you can access it online. There's national libraries. The one in Edinburgh is unbelievable, where there's an incredible newspaper archive. These things are like gold dust. I kid you not. If they didn't exist, there's a massive void in respect of the documentation of the history of Scottish football and Celtic as a whole. So it's not just a case of, they're garbage and it's great that they're falling and collapsing. What annoys me about them is the bad side. It's the sinister side, the dark side. It's the favouring of one team. It's sending a hearse up to Celtic Park with the headline Celtic RIP when we were in financial turmoil in the 1990s and early 90s. That kind of side of it. But when you go right back and you read articles by people like Ian Archer, for example, one of the best journalists covering Scottish football, unbelievable. The way he wrote was astonishing. It was like you're reading prose, and he's talking about a game of football. It was unbelievable, right? But now it's completely changed. It's completely turned on its head, and we've got to be as balanced as we can, but we can challenge a lot of the nonsense. And there's a few coming through challenging it, and that's great. Tony Ratton, incidentally, festive greetings to the Celtic family from Sunderland, not a million miles from where you were brought up yourself, Ian, down in Sunderland. Big shout out to I Love Supreme, the guys down there as well, who have been running fanzines since the 1990s, I think, and we work with them quite closely. Good guys. Green Lichty, apparently, Stephen Thompson, I don't know, I never watched it last night. Stephen Thompson described Suter as one of our best defenders. Smiley face. Sometimes you just can't hide the favouritism. And you know what? It doesn't really matter because Celtic are on top. Stephen Donnelly, after Sunday, I was so disappointed, but that just makes the week great again. And then it was 12. Chris McAway, 12 points. We move on to the game against St Johnstone. We're looking at getting as many of our starters back as possible. But to be fair, when you're bringing in a player like Yang, who is much maligned, he gets a lot of criticism, but he wins the penalty. Let's start off with that. So Yang wins the penalty. I'm not his biggest fan. I don't think he's going to make it in a Celtic jersey. I don't think that's the quality that you're looking for on the bench to bring on in a big game in Europe, in a League Cup final against Rangers in the league. No. That's going to light up the game, that's going to turn the game around. I don't think so. But based on yesterday, I think he showed a good character to constantly look for the ball. He was positive in his running. He wins the penalty kick. But the penalty kick itself has become quite controversial because some are saying it wasn't. And the first guy that said it wasn't was Stuart Kettlewell. Now, this isn't the first time Kettlewell's come out with this negative take on it. I mean, I'm watching that. How's it not a penalty? Can a goalie do that to a player and take him down in the box? Now, maybe Yang made the most of it. Was he impeded though? I mean, it went to VAR. They watched it from every angle. Chris, penalty kick for me.
I'm just really, really concerned about poor Billy from Super Scoreboard. I mean, is that his New Year ruined as well as his Christmas? You know, so. I mean, just a poor guy. I mean, somebody get that boy some counselling. I mean, I don't really enjoy seeing players throw their arms up when they go down. I think they should always try and, even if you're trying to do a wee bit of simulation, make it look a wee bit more genuine. But I think ultimately, we trust our referees. We trust our we trust our referees, all right. But we have to and should trust our referees, the refereeing process. VAR's been brought in for a reason. I think we have to. It's not going away. So ultimately, we just have to suck it up and take it, even if the decision doesn't go our way. Yesterday, I think it did. I think it was a pretty good decision. I think if there was any doubt about it, it's such a fine margin that, come on. It could be given or it couldn't. It's ultimately put it in the hands of the referee and he gives it. So, to be honest, people that are crying about it, saying it wasn't a penalty, bigger things going on in the world,
Well, in terms of the penalty, if we're focusing on the penalty award, the contact was made. It wasn't made, in his midriff. It was in his upper body. Whether or not it was enough contact to put him down has been viewed and viewed again on VAR, and they decided that is a penalty kick. The thing is, though, Kettlewell comes out. It's not the first time against Celtic. Comes out and bemoans the fact and calls it out and puts the pressure on the referees. Celtic, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of whether or not that was a penalty, Celtic had 2 big penalty shouts through the game, both involving Dyson Maeda, right? Mm-hmm. So Dyson Maeda, I mean, he's been on the end of some horrific decisions this season, Ian. What about the one against Motherwell last time round? I think it was Stephen O'Donnell, right? Where he is taken out in the box, and because he doesn't want to land on his face, he puts his hands down, which is a natural reaction and instinct of any human being about to land on the deck, and his hand hits the ball and puts it in the net. Motherwell got a free kick for that. It's a penalty all day long. That's the last game. This time round, he gets kicked in the face, right? Good save by the goalie, right? He gets kicked in the face going for the rebound. And then later on in the second half, Ian, right, he gets on the end of a run. I think it was at Engels that played the ball through. And two hands in the back, take him out. Sure. And Maeda doesn't play for it, by the way. He doesn't play for it, right? He goes down and he's back up. So there was 2 penalty shouts that arguably were penalties in any case, Ian. But, you know, I just feel that the media are bad for it, and so are fellow managers coming out, putting that pressure on the referee, right? And it's almost like turning the screw on them, knowing that they've been in the focus and they've been highlighted over the last couple of weeks in Scottish football, and they're ramping it up. And it's not even for a decision that was a massive debate, to be honest. So I think managers like Kettlewell need to be better in situations like that, Ian. For me, it was a penalty. The other 2, you could argue, were penalties as well. And I think you're clutching at straws if you think that's a turning point in the game, that decision, Ian.
Well, his team's just been humped, you know, so he's going to come out and he's not going to come out and sort of, you know, applaud the referees. I think, you know, some people do. Some people are magnanimous and will come out and call it as it is and be sort of have that sort of fairness and balance. And others will come out and just try and deflect. You know, it's not as if it's an unknown thing in our league, deflection tactics. So I just think that he sort of done that. And he's actually quite well spoken, I think, quite a lot of the time, you know, and Kettlewell. I don't mind him. Quite a fairly articulate fella. But again, I think it's just a little bit of sour grapes as much as anything else, you know, and a lot of stuff in football is subjective. But yeah, I think also as well, you know, it's quite easy to play upon that fact that there was the sort of the controversy in the League Cup final and the sort of chatter around it. So yeah, he's just playing that, you know, and sort of covering over the fact his team's just been humped.
No, you're right. Yeah. Sorry, Chris.
You've got to watch that. Yeah, I was going to say, you've got to watch that doesn't become the narrative throughout the season now, because of all that furore that was, you know, just ridiculously highlighted over the past couple of weeks since the cup final. Is this now going to become the go-to sort of playbook for opposition managers now? If they don't get one decision, is it going to be, oh well, there you go? It's just this. Yeah. Are they going to start using this pattern of assistance? Is this where it's going to go? Because
that's where we are.
You know,
I think that's where we are now, Chris. Because what's happened is you've got one club making statements about it.
Yeah, and with no repercussion, by the way. Nobody's batting them down. Just
exactly.
Let them go. You know?
So you're giving them, you're emboldening them to make these statements, almost, not quite, but almost naming referees or assistants, right? You've got that side of it. You've got this media side of it as well that are playing into it. I mean, what outlet didn't cover it 24/7? The scales, the penalty. Unbelievable, the coverage that got when you've got other decisions within that game, which I'm talking about now. There were other decisions in the game that didn't go Celtic's way. Yeah. Kuhn missed a game and a half due to injury because of the poor, because he wasn't protected. And obviously, you know, in that instance, Rangers weren't penalised in relation to the red card that should have been given. It was a terrible tackle. Kuhn was writhing in agony on the deck. So this is... we could keep using the word narrative, but it is a narrative. It's a narrative that's been set by one club making a statement without any question. You've got managers coming out and just piling in. You've got the media coming in, piling in. Who's questioning the fact that if you not quite naming Frank Connor are putting Frank Connor under the microscope.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Saw it
right?
on social media yesterday.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, he's being targeted on an individual basis. So it's not healthy, Chris, but that's exactly where we are. It's completely turned around now. Every single Celtic decision is being scrutinised because somewhere in here they've rewired themselves into believing that there's a conspiracy against Rangers, a team who have got a defender with the best goal scoring record in British football history, probably world football history, on account of the fact that he gets so many free kicks and penalty kicks in. And unbelievable that you would think for a moment that you're getting hard done by 75 games without conceding a penalty. Come on. And domestic football.
It's unheard of.
Top of the table, season on penalties awarded, but there's a conspiracy against you. Get a grip. So this is where we are, Chris. I think that's exactly where we are. Now, we've touched on Yang. Obviously, he's the third choice right winger behind Kuhn and Jamesy Forrest. Kuhn came back into the game yesterday. I want to talk a wee bit about Kuhn. Let's get positive here on the 27th of December. Right, I had a wee look at Nicholas Kuhn because I was keeping an eye on his goals and assists this season. So yesterday, another goal, and, brilliant to see him. And he's back for Ibrox. So he probably will start against St Johnstone. He'll probably get the 90 minutes, maybe 65, and obviously ready for the game against Rangers. Goals and assists, 24 and 24 this season, which is a goal or an assist every 68 and a half minutes. The guy's sensational. And I pointed this out with Lawrence after the game yesterday, Chris, proof that you can still pick up a bargain. £3.5 million for Nicholas Kuhn.
Yeah, and before anyone else brings it up in the comments, I'm going to say when the signing was announced, I wasn't keen. I didn't. I thought it was a wrong profile, a player we should be looking at, and I've been eating humble pie ever since. But what I have done, and I do want to point this out, is ever since I first saw him play, even when he was struggling with his fitness, and he cuts inside and he tries a wee outside of the ball cross. Outside of the foot cross, rather, and I just thought, well, there's something there, something about this guy. I want to watch him, and as I know you remind me quite often, you've backed him right from day one. But it shows that if you do your scouting, I mean, there's an element of luck involved as well. But if you do your scouting properly, and you know the type of player that's going to fit in and benefit your system, then you can pick up some absolute diamonds. And I think Kuhn is just that. He's a diamond. He's been absolutely immense. This season, I thought towards the end of last season he was starting to really pick up his game. He's just taking it another level this season, as have a few other players. I think we talk about AJ doing the same. But Kuhn has fallen into that realm of being a game changer now for me. I think it's whether he's starting or whether you're able to bring him off the bench in a game where you maybe need that creativity. I think he's phenomenal. The downside is that opposition players and managers are now going to recognise that he's a danger man and try and stifle him. But of course, by virtue of that, you free up space for some of your other players. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful player to have at the club. He looks like he's enjoying his football. He's doing some absolutely spectacular stuff. He just looks like one of these really hungry players, like he's got that second chance at a football career. Now, I'd love to keep him with us for a good few years yet, but you think there's, he's still got the ability to go in that kind of upward trajectory in his career, and good luck to him. And funnily enough, I remember my uncle always used to tell me it was always good if you got a German player, because he always told me about that old German player that we used to have at Celtic, Fritz, was it? Fritz, Fritz, a grand old team to play for, that one.
I was thinking for a moment.
Sorry, I'll get my coat.
Get a coat. I was thinking for a moment, German players. How many have we had? Not a great deal, actually, of German footballers. I think
Andy Tom's the one that always stands out for me. And Hinkel, we had Hinkel as well.
Hinkel. We had Hinkel. Was Jeremy Toljan German? I think Jeremy Toljan was German as well. But yeah,
Moritz Jens came from German football. Yeah. Was he German as well? Was he German national as well? I can't remember.
I'd need to check Moritz.
Jens was German.
I was a fan.
Yep.
Jens, we're talking Jens, aren't we? Absolutely, yeah. A player that I thought we probably should have signed. Nicholas Kuhn, for me, he's 24 years of age, right? So you're looking at the fact that there's so much progress, there's so much development still to come from him. He's a player that seems to have this hunger about him, Ian. He's got that steely Dyson Maeda kind of vibe about him sometimes, where he shows no emotion, even when he's doing something really good and celebrating a goal. He's just got that steely, ice-cold kind of look about him. Celtic, for me, you're talking about like a second chance or a big chance, Chris. I think we are the third big chance he's had, and the previous two haven't worked out. Now, in his kind of younger days, he was at RB Leipzig. He was also at St. Pauli when he was even younger than that. But he got an opportunity at Ajax. He got an opportunity at Bayern Munich. He wasn't able to break through. And then he's went away and consolidated himself with Rapid Vienna and became the kind of star man. And Celtic pick him up and he's got that kind of third chance. There's enough players out there, Ian, who have shown enough potential to get the move, but haven't been able to execute it when they get there. And this, for me, I'm not saying it's the last chance saloon. Nicola's going to have a brilliant career, whatever happens. But this is his big chance again for me. Now, it takes me back to a conversation I had last week with Lawrence and Liam, though. Every single time you get a great side, you know you're on a cycle. You know at Celtic you're on a cycle, right? So even if we've mentioned Invincible season a few times this season, this episode. So if you go back to that, you knew that Dembele was on that cycle. You knew that we're not going to have him for 3, 5, or 5 years. He's going to leave, and we're going to make a lot of money off him. And we're back. We're going to reinvest in that, and we're going to continue with that. Obviously, we lost Matt O'Reilly at the beginning of the season, right? So he was the guy we all kind of thought was going to come to the end of his Celtic cycle pretty soon, and he did, and we made a lot of good money off him. I'm looking at that squad, and I'm thinking to myself, it's almost a unique situation where I don't expect us to lose any of our star players. Now, I agree with you, and I think a lot of the stuff around Kyogo is just kind of paper talk. I do. I think it's gossip, right? Yeah. The other players who have had interest in the past, probably Hatate, that interest has waned. I don't see any interest from anybody coming in for Rio and making a move for him anytime soon. Kuhn, as great as he is, he's not in that part of his cycle developmentally that he's going to leave Celtic yet. The time's not right. So I think we're in something of a unique scenario where we can strengthen again in January. We can strengthen again in the summer. And if you can strengthen and get yourself 3, what you would call starters, 3 guys that come in and improve the starting 11, and you do that January and you do it in the summer, then you've got a side, right, that isn't coming to the end of its cycle. So you're not going to lose your top 3 players. And you then might be able to continue that progress in Europe. And I always feel that we've always just been that 2 or 3 players short because we're stuck in the cycle of selling our best players. I don't expect us to sell Kyogo or Kuhn or Hatate or Alistair Johnson or Cameron Carter-Vickers, any of our top players. I don't expect us to sell them this season or next season. I think we're in a very, very good position in that respect.
I hope you're right. I've said this in the past as well. And look, I think in terms of the cycle, I think I'd include Jota in that as well. I think that was kind of a freak. You know, he still had more of a story to write at Celtic before that huge offer came in. So I can imagine he still would be here now. I kind of think that Jota found a home, and if he does find his way back to Celtic Park, I think that'll play on his mind moving in the future. I think the only team he'd probably leave Celtic for after that would be Benfica, as he stated in the past. But every player's got their price. I think that was proven with Jota. And yeah, if you continually sell your assets, then you can never build that platform, and you can never build a legacy, and you can never build a team. We've been guilty in that in the past, sort of just dismantling teams too quickly, so we can never build that consistency. We can never, build that sort of legacy. So I tend to agree with you. Touching all the wood I can touch, I tend to agree with you that I think this we're kind of the curve. We're on that sort of ascendance part of the curve at the moment. So it's imperative that Desmond sort of backs Rodgers. Really backs his ambition, and that exponentially we add those 2 or 3 starters. Kieran Tierney's been mentioned. I think that'll be great. I've not had a chance to sort of comment on that actually, but I think Kieran, he's not going to go down as an Arsenal legend. He's not going to go down as a Celtic legend, but he could have done. So maybe he's looking at the likes of Kalmak. He's looking at the likes of James Forrest and thinking, look, money's not everything. He can come back and win a lot of trophies and actually go down as a bona fide legend. And the same with Jota as well. Jota could come back and make himself a legend. So those 2 would be first team starters. So that's 2 out of the 3 you mentioned. So yeah, I think that's hopefully what's going to happen.
you know, the Tierney stuff isn't pie in the sky, right? It's not. A lot of people are maybe sick of the sound of his name. We speak about him so often on here, right? He's up there with Paddy Roberts, because we spoke a bit about Paddy Roberts. Let's be honest, right? We haven't really gone into the odds and Edward one, but you know, Tierney is getting spoken about a lot. Jota, it's a wish list thing. I don't see any links. I don't see anything that's actually adding credence to that story. But the Tierney story is a thing. It's a thing. So what do we know at Acsom? And we've said this before, but if you're just tuning in, because we're 1,800 plus strong today, so there'll be a few folk maybe not have heard this. So we were told from a very, very good source in the summer that he was number one on the transfer list, on the hit list for Brendan Rodgers. Rodgers wanted him in the summer. He gets injured for Scotland. Muscle off the bone. I'll keep saying that because it sounds horrific. That was his injury. And then that was it. Kibosh the deal. And at that stage, we bring in Alex Bailly on loan. So we bring him in on loan, and obviously by the very nature of that deal, it's very much short-termism. It's one of the deals that unless you can Bernardo him or Jota him and bring him in on a permanent after it, it's very much a sticky plaster. It's a stopgap. But what's actually happened since then is Tierney's obviously fought back to fitness, and Arsenal have made it known that they're willing to let him go. The latest, and by the way, there was the foundation event. Another wee bit of information we got from someone who was at the table beside Rodgers and Tierney is it was discussed. Nobody tapped him up. It was discussed, and Tierney said that is the move he wanted. He wanted to come back to Celtic. So that's what we know at Acsom. Rodgers wanted him in the summer. Tierney has said fairly recently he wants to come back. Right. Arsenal then make it known that they're going to get rid of him. In the meantime, Greg Taylor's not signed a new deal. Taylor's a number one choice at left back. He's not signed a new deal. Celtic are not going to offer him what he wants. Right? He's not getting 25 grand a week. There's no way Celtic are offering him that. That's what he wants. The chances are Greg Taylor will move on. And then the most bizarre thing about this whole left back escapade is Alexandro Bernabei went away and became like this wizard in Brazil, right? To the point where you've now got two teams chasing him, and there's talk of 7 million quid for Bernabei. Now, I know that is mind-blowing stuff. Now, apparently, because I think Tierney's got 6 months of his deal to go come January, am I right? So he's in a similar scenario to Taylor. So obviously, but Celtic will want a fee for Taylor if he moves on, right? It won't be what you would have if he was on a 5-year deal, but they'll want a fee of sorts. So will Arsenal. Arsenal will want a fee. So in terms of we all know his wages, 120 grand a week, right? And he would need to accept a Celtic wage if he was coming back, right? And we know what the peak is. The peak is Callum McGregor's wage. So he would need to match Callum McGregor's wage, and then the money men can figure out how they can obviously maximise his earnings in other ways with signing on fees, etc. But Arsenal want a fee. I don't know what the fee is. Imagine, right, guys, imagine we were able to broker this deal by selling Bernabei. Imagine Bernabei actually finances the Tierney return. That would be the wackiest story in recent times, right? Because he, for me, couldn't get a game for this Celtic side in a million years. That's always been my take on it. But Bernabei, 7 million, mad figure. Greg Taylor, what do you get for a guy who's got 6 months in his contract? 2.5, 3 million quid. You're not going to get a lot of money.
No.
For Greg Taylor. But you might be able to gather 10 million quid to do the deal. And I don't know what Arsenal want for Tierney, but I think it might happen, Ian. I don't think it's pie in the sky. It could well happen. Some people say it's a step back. You never go back, etc. I just respond by saying, is he better than what we've already got? And my answer to that is yes, he is.
Absolutely. You know, the only sort of downside is his injury record, as we all know, but it's a no-brainer. You know, and I think he's going to come back with a point to prove. I find it bizarre that he's sort of the way he's been treated at Arsenal, to be honest, Kieran Tierney. You know, I know he's loved by the fans for his attitude, you know, and carrying his boots in a Tesco bag, you know, man of the people. And you know, we know that's not rubbish either. You know, he actually is that type of guy. You know, he's a good guy, and I think in terms of the experience he would bring back to Celtic, and having that mentality, I think it would be fantastic. So, yeah, come home, Kieran.
come home,
Do you
Kieran.
know? Can I just make one point, right? Because we keep hearing this. His injury record. Right. Let's get 2 words to say about his injury record. John Hartson.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to leave that there. John Hartson.
No, listen, that's a good shout, because obviously we've been in his company fairly recently, Chris. And it got to the point where Martin O'Neill said to him, I'm signing you. I'm not even going to put you through a medical. So he didn't fail a medical because he didn't have one at Celtic. He'd already failed 3, I believe. The most famous of which was obviously Charlton Athletic. But he failed 3. And then he comes to Celtic, no medical, and becomes a legend. One of only 31 Celtic players to score 100 or more goals for the club. So it's a great point. And again, I think also, if you're in that scenario where Bernabe goes for 7 million, I'll never get over that. Greg Taylor goes for, let's say, 3, because he's not going to get the deal that he wants at Celtic. And we've got young Baye, who is a backup to the end of the season. We might end up having to buy another left back in the summer as well. But that's just the way it is. If there's somebody at the football club who can come through, then great. Another thing I continually go on about is having a core group of players who understand what Celtic is, what it means, the fabric of the football club, the winning mentality, and the expectations and the standards, and all these things that every time you meet an ex-Celt, they tell you that. Tommy Burns used to tell you this when he was a player. He would sit next to the newest player in the first team squad, be that a young guy on the bus or a new signing. Danny McGrain used to do it to Charlie Nicholas, and it was all about almost indoctrinating them into the system of what it takes to be a Celtic player. And not just representing them on the park, but also 24/7 as a Celtic player off the park. And I do think it's important to have a core group of that. And we're doing okay just now because we've got Jamesy Forrest, we've got Callum McGregor. Listen, we've got Tony Ralston. Now, the thing with Tony is not the most fashionable player. He runs like he's carrying bricks. He does. He is the bricky, right? But you look at his performance at the weekend. Now, I mean, let's think about this for a minute. As soon as Alistair Johnston's back, and the chances are he'll be back against St Johnstone, Ralston, you're on the bench, son. And Ralston's expected just to go and sit on the bench and not throw the toys out the pram and be a great squad player and be ready just in case AJ needs to come off. Now, that's all about mentality. What a team player that he does that. And I keep saying this, he has played for Celtic. This is his 10th season that he has played first-team football for Celtic. He only turned 26 last month. It doesn't even seem possible, right? And he's now played 117 games, so he probably wins a trophy every 5 or 6 games for Celtic. But yesterday, 1 assist. He gets an assist, and he plays 2 crosses into the box, one for Kyogo, one for Scales, that were brilliant, and they deserved goals. And you look at him and you think, right, he's not the greatest player in the world, but sometimes a squad needs a Tony Ralston in it.
You do.
You know what I mean, Chris? He's no fashionable. And he is, for me, a very, very important squad player.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought he done really well yesterday, from what I've seen. And I think he's a wee bit like a bit less talented James Milner, right? The James Milner was the guy who always used to get like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10 every game. And I sort of view, I appreciate that this is a very different comparison, but I just think Tony Ralston, you always know what you're going to get when you bring him on, right? And sometimes it works out better than others, depending on the game and the opposition and the level you're playing at. But I think, again, he's I don't know what it is. I feel as though we'd be a poorer team without him. I really do, because not just what the mentality I think he'll undoubtedly bring to the table, but it's just an honesty about the player. But it's an honesty that, when it works, is backed up with some pretty good big moments. I mean, we all remember the last-minute goal that he scored, which sort of coined the "we never stop" mentality, and the paraphrase we kept hearing. And he pops up. He's got a decent cross on him. He's got a bit of rough and tumble about him. Sometimes I think if he's up against a particular winger, I always think the winger knows he's been in a game if he's been up against Tony Ralston. Because Tony Ralston will just chuck his whole body at him. And look, he's never going to be the star man, and I mean that with the greatest respect to the player. I don't think he's going to be ever one of these guys that's, the poster child for the club. But I would be willing to bet that every one of his teammates is glad to have him in the squad. And I think he's a guy that I think they can depend on. I think he's a guy that there's very little risk with Ralston. Now again, we could probably upgrade on that position. We could get someone that maybe push AJ for a starting berth. I'm not sure Tony's ever going to do that. But you know what? AJ's playing so well, and if he's playing 30 plus or 40 plus games a season, and Ralston's his relief player, I'm happy with that.
How long is the player happy with that, Ian? How long is the player happy to be that perennial backup? I mean, in only one of the 10 seasons we're talking about, has he played 20 or more games for Celtic? This season, he's already made 14 appearances, so he's on his way to making a 20 or more appearances this season. But the only time he did that was in Angie's first season, where we had something of a right-back crisis, and then we started buying them like they were going out of fashion. Juranovic comes in, Johnston comes in, all of a sudden we've got 3 decent right-backs. But as an individual, as a professional, how long does he accept that that's his place? Is he the type of guy who might be here in another 5 seasons and I'm going, 15th season Tony Ralston's been at the club. He's only 31. He's only played 200 games, but this guy's pivotal and I can't wait for his testimonial. How long does it take for him to get annoyed and have ambitions? Or is he quite unique in the modern game?
We've asked this question before, haven't we? I've certainly sort of asked it. And it's, it's a straight sort of dilemma, really. Does he want to go and be the main man somewhere else, maybe drop down a little bit, or has he found his niche in life, which is, at the end of the day, living the dream that a lot of us would have loved to have done, and the standard to be a first team player or around the first team at Celtic is very, very high. So I think if he did sort of leave, I think he'd go on to have a decent career somewhere else. The expectation at Celtic, as we know, is to win every game. So I think he's got all that. He's got all that. It's very important to have that type of character around the sort of the dressing room. So I think it helps Celtic to have someone that's ready to come in and sacrifice himself for the team. I think it's the latter. I think he'll probably be happy to stay, and just sort of say that he's a Celtic player, and sort of bang the drum about that. That's certainly probably what I would do.
Well, if he does that, he's unique. He's unique in the modern game. I mean, you look back on the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and there were players that were kicking around for years and years and years. I mean, I think about the Quality Street kids. Davy Katanak was at Celtic for years. Paul Wilson was at Celtic for 12 years. And he had high points in his career. Of course he does, particularly 1975, where he couldn't stop scoring in cup finals. But a lot of seasons, you're looking at appearances under 10. So he's now a reserve player again at the age of 26. It's incredible that in this day and age, we have got a couple of guys like this, because Stephen Welsh is kind of falling into that category as well. Yeah, I think Welshie will probably leave the football club, sooner rather than later. Whereas there's a thing about Tony where it's as if he's just going to be here forever and he's just eventually going to be in with the bricks. But there you go. Thanks everybody for getting involved. That's well over an hour now. It's been tremendous talking to Chris and Ian for all things Celtic. Tomorrow is Saturday, and obviously on the Sunday we'll be covering the game. Things get back to normal, and then we have the new year and we do it all over again. But thanks everybody for getting involved. We're 12 points clear. There's a massive big gap there. The meltdown, the festive meltdown continues. Thanks everybody for getting involved. If you've not done so already, subscribe to the channel, give us a big thumbs up, and join us again on Sunday for a Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail, folks.